certain area or something that people commonly misconstrue, such as scarcity, that you could speak on?
Yeah.
And hopefully correct.
Yeah, there's a couple, but I'll start with at least one. I think the major concern that I hear is like, there's nothing to it. Like there's no physical thing. Like how could it be valuable? People think about investing. They think about stocks. You have a company that is spitting out cash flows and anticipates and projects to do so for years to come. So when you buy a share of their company, you're basically buying a share of the sum of their future cash flows. And that's like what it is. There's a real entity. And then, you can also think about investing, you think about gold. It's like, well, gold, again, like we talked about, has had this value that it's maintained, and the value has grown over years and years and years because it's scarce. And so, gold, again, it's like, well, people, it's shiny and it looks good, and like you can sell it as a necklace or like whatever. There's something physical there. Same thing with like real estate, or again, I mentioned like sports cards, I think is like kind of actually an underrated analogy almost, or sneakers or whatever, any art, anything that holds value. It's in some way linked to scarcity. And so, what was I getting at? So you talked about the scarcity piece, but I think what I'm actually getting at here is that the misconception is that most people think that you need something physical in order to, deserve a significant valuation of that thing. And my argument is that no, that's not true. You just need, it doesn't need to be physical, but in the case of Bitcoin, it's basically a database that can't be changed, which says that so-and-so owns this amount of, Bitcoin, or, this Bitcoin belongs to so-and-so. And it's in a way that can't be tampered with by any government or any institution or individual. And that's a part of the whole, the reason why some of the early adopters of Bitcoin were so excited about it was this ability to, make money for the people, where the government can't print $1 trillion a year like you're seeing now and devalue the worth, the purchasing power of everyone who holds dollars in the economy. Right now, it's I don't want to get into it, but the minimum wage thing is kind of interesting as well. But the way to debunk that with Bitcoin, I think, is to realize that money and value is ultimately a belief system. Bitcoin is ultimately a belief system, and I wrote about this a little bit. But if you think about Bitcoin simply as a belief system and ignore a lot of the fluff, what you realize is we've got a small percentage of the world that owns and believes in Bitcoin, and the two are not necessarily the same, but you've got a small percentage of the world that really has really high conviction in Bitcoin and its future, and they will not sell it until it's at least reached some semblance of that future. Because if they sell it any time before then, they're selling, unless they really need money in like a cash trap situation, they're holding it because they believe in the future so strongly. And then you have a very large population that doesn't strongly believe in Bitcoin. And it's much more quickly happening from my perspective that people from that large population are becoming exposed by people from the small population and coming to believe in Bitcoin. It's a very, it's almost like a religiously powerful thing to believe in because of it. It's not just like an investment, right? It's this concept that we can all hold this thing that retains value. We can put our money somewhere where the government can't control it. And it's hard to imagine in the US when we've been pretty stable, but in countries and by pretty stable, I mean like very stable in that, the value of dollars, there's been inflation, but we don't go through like overnight volatility like you see in Venezuela or Argentina, where their life savings basically becomes worthless because something that the government has done. And certain countries, I think India also like overnight said like this certain type of bill was no longer valid. Like imagine if they just said like, if you held your money and, rich people have the ability to invest with all these institutions and, invest in all these different assets, but poorer people or middle class or whatever, they hold a good amount of their money in like cash and like, especially in some of these poorer countries. And imagine if like all your $100 bills were no longer valid and you couldn't use them. And so it's very scary. And like people have dealt with this firsthand. You can read, there's a piece by this guy, I'm going to mess up his name, but Wences is his first name. I don't want to even say Cesares or something is his last name. I think he's on the board of PayPal, but his family was from a background like this. And he wrote about how Bitcoin was personal for him. It's kind of interesting. But so the thing is, getting back to the belief system, the thing is this it's such a larger population that doesn't yet believe in Bitcoin. And it's such a strong rationale for believing in it once you sort of get it. And so it becomes like almost like virally spreadable. And that's kind of why it's so many more people have become to believe in it over the last decade already, is because it's such it's a story that's so attractive to like get behind. And so you have all these people coming in and starting to believe. And then on the other side, these believers, they're just seeing the price go up over time. And there's been tests all throughout Bitcoin's history of the value drops 80%. It's happened 4 separate times, at least, I think, that it's dropped at least 70 or 80% in value in like very short period of time. Something that would freak stock investors out. Like it's just not something that happens, but that's the way Bitcoin's worked. But the believers aren't phased. And the people who didn't have high conviction, they might panic and sell, but then Bitcoin slowly starts accumulating at this lower level and the believers start coming in with more and more conviction. And then it goes to the next level and it goes 20x. And that's kind of how the history has gone so far. And so I don't see any reason that history is not going to continue. There's a saying, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. So I don't know if the next, peak for Bitcoin is going to be a 20x followed by a 70 or 80% fall. I have a guess as to where it might go from here in the near term, but near-term guesses are less valuable to me than long-term conviction. And the long-term conviction for me is that while there is certainly a fail case, well, not certainly, but while I certainly choose to believe that there is a fail case, whether I can know what it would be now or not, the success case is a lot bigger than what Bitcoin's valued at right now. And that's a part of why I value it. So ultimately, the reason, it doesn't need a physical thing as long as it's something, and it exists in some capacity, which in this case is kind of proof of ownership. As long as people believe it has value, it does.